Welcome to today's historical deep dive into a life so epic, so improbable, it feels less like history and more like a fever dream. He was the general who conquered kingdoms, the emperor who redrew maps, the man who embodied ambition like no other. Yet, he also left a trail of devastation and proved that even the highest peaks are just steeper falls. We're talking, of course, about Napoleon Bonaparte, a name synonymous with power, control, and the almost terrifying force of a single will bent on reshaping the world. How did a mere Corsican artillery officer rise to dominate Europe? Was it destiny, genius, or simply being in the right place at the most chaotic possible time? His story isn't just battles and politics. It's a profound lesson in human nature, the seductive call of power, and the often blurry line between savior and tyrant. It's about choices made under unimaginable pressure, but compromises forged in the crucible of ambition, and the legacy left behind when the dust finally settles. It's a narrative filled with strategic brilliance and crippling blind spots, moments of soaring triumph, and depths of crushing defeat. If you love immersive, real storytelling about ambition and downfall, hit like and subscribe. It helps us more than you know. We're pulling back the curtain on the man behind the myth, exploring the defining moments that shaped his journey and, by extension, the modern world. It's a complex portrait, one that challenges easy judgment and demands we look closer at the forces that elevate individuals to such heights. Drop a comment with your favorite Napoleon quote, or the moment that shocked you most. Perhaps it was his early ruthlessness, his unlikely coronation, or his lonely end. His life offers a staggering array of potential answers. Let's begin, and change the way you think about history. You stand in Paris, autumn 1799. The air, crisp with the changing season, also crackles with an electric uncertainty. Years after the guillotine's swift, final judgments silenced kings, queens, and priests alike, the revolution, a hungry beast, has devoured its own. What remains is the Directory, a government less of statesmen and more of squabbling, corrupt figures clinging precariously to power. The streets reflect this rot. They're alive with rumor, thick with fear, and underscored by the gnawing hunger of a nation adrift. The grand revolutionary fervor has curdled into cynicism. Royalists, whispering of a return to stability under a crown, plot in the shadows. Jacobins, remembering the bloody, purer days of radical change, mutter darkly of revolution anew. And the common people? They simply long for order. Any order that will bring bread back to their tables and predictability to their lives. They yearn for a firm hand, a clear direction, something, anything, to fill the void left by failed systems and broken promises. This isn't just a period of political weakness, it's a vacuum. And nature, as the old saying goes, abhors a vacuum. You hear a name whispered with increasing frequency, a name that carries the distant echoes of triumphs in Italy and the intriguing, slightly suspect mystery of an expedition to Egypt. Bonaparte. He returns now, not in the pre-planned glory of a military parade, but having left his army behind in the Egyptian sands. A gamble so audacious it feels either desperately reckless or supremely confident. It's a move that baffles many, unnerves more. Europe watches, apprehensive, wondering what this sudden reappearance means. France holds its breath. This is the moment when the stage is not being set for a traditional hero, but for a force that understands the ultimate principle governing such chaotic times. That in the void left by exhausted ideals and collapsed authority, Power is not offered on a silver platter. It is taken. This isn't about popular mandate or constitutional process. It's about seizing the opportune moment, leveraging the sheer desperation of a populace tired of chaos. The insight here is stark, almost brutal. Societal chaos is the most fertile ground upon which ambitious individuals can plant the seeds of their destiny. They don't just react to the disorder. They capitalize on it, leveraging desperation into opportunity. The general who arrives when everyone is praying for a strong leader isn't just lucky. He's strategically positioned. Bonaparte didn't create the Directory's weakness, but he understood its implications better than anyone. He saw not just a country in crisis, but a pathway to absolute power paved by that very crisis. This moment isn't just historical fact, it's a profound question laid at your feet. When freedom feels less like liberty and more like terrifying anarchy, when the daily struggle for survival outweighs grand principles, how easily are you willing to trade liberty for the promise of order? Even if that promise comes wrapped in a uniform, whispers of control, and demands unquestioning loyalty. Napoleon's ascent begins here, in the heart of a nation willing to surrender its newfound freedoms for the illusion of security. And the man who saw that desperation as his ultimate weapon. You step into the Salle du Conseil des 500 on the 19th Brumaire, year 8 of the Republic, November 10th, 1799. The air crackles, not with patriotic fervor, but with suspicion and fear. The Directory is collapsing, France is adrift, and this small man, Napoleon Bonaparte, fresh from Egypt and hailed as a savior, stands before the Council of 500. He walks to the tribune, ready to address this seething assembly, ostensibly to resign his military command and take a civil post, but everyone senses the unspoken ambition. He begins to speak, perhaps haltingly, not the orator of the battlefield, but a soldier out of his element in this den of lawyers and politicians. And then the dam breaks. Shouts erupt, a tidal wave of fury. Down with the dictator! Outlaw him! The chamber transforms instantly from a legislative body into a mob. Deputies surge forward, not to listen, but to assault. Hands grab at him. Insults rain down like stones. The carefully constructed facade of legal transition shatters. In this crucible of raw, unadulterated political violence, the conquering hero stumbles. His face drains of color. He is pale, visibly shaken, momentarily losing the iron nerve that held armies together. He stumbles back, perhaps even falling, saved only by his accompanying grenadiers. This is not the image history often paints, the steely, preordained ruler coolly seizing power. This is chaos, mere failure, a desperate moment where ambition collides head-on with furious opposition. And for an instant, ambition is losing. But history often turns on the quick actions of others. His brother, Lucien Bonaparte, the president of the Council of 500, surveys the pandemonium. He sees the danger, the near mutiny. He declares the chamber is controlled by assassins bought with English gold. He calls in the troops waiting outside. The doors burst open and soldiers pour in, bayonets fixed. Sunlight glints off cold steel as the grenadiers, led by Marat, march down the aisles. They physically clear the hall, deputies scattering before the glinting points. The legislative body of France is expelled by force of arms, not by decree, but by the brutal reality of might overcoming right. This was the coup of 18 Brumaire. It wasn't a perfectly executed maneuver like a brilliant chess endgame. It was messy, violent, almost a disaster, saved only by the loyalty of the military and the dramatic intervention of a quick-thinking brother. It highlights a raw truth about the seizure of power. Sometimes it is not a stroke of genius or popular mandate, but a desperate, forceful act, reliant less on clever planning and more on sheer obedience and the breakdown of organized opposition. The savior of France was nearly torn apart by the very representatives he sought to rule, rescued by the bayonets of the army he commanded. And this scene prompts a vital, unsettling question. How many of history's great moments, how many transitions of power we later describe with strategic hindsight, were actually planned brilliance unfolding? And how much was simply brute force, raw will, or fortunate timing overcoming disorganization and the lack of an equally ruthless opposition? Was this leadership or just muscle? Was it destiny or just a near-fatal stumble saved by swords? You see Napoleon, now first consul, seated at a grand table, a plume pen poised over a scroll. This isn't a war treaty. It's the Constitution of Year 8, a document ostensibly restoring order and establishing a republic. But watch closely as he signs. The stroke of his pen, a quiet coup. This constitution, drafted under his direct influence, is a labyrinth designed to consolidate raw power. It vests immense authority in the first consul, control over law drafting, the appointment of ministers, judges, diplomats, and the critical prefects who will govern France's departments, extending his reach into every corner of the nation. Two other consuls exist, yes, figures arranged for constitutional window dressing, but they are subordinate, easily outvoted or simply bypassed. The illusion of shared power is meticulously maintained, a thin veil woven from complex legal jargon. But the reality is starkly clear. Napoleon is scripting a new form of monarchy, one wearing republican clothes. He immediately sets about appointing these prefects, centralizing state authority in a way the Bourbon kings themselves could only have dreamed, dismantling local autonomy with swift, calculated efficiency. This scene underscores a fundamental principle of power dynamics. True power isn't merely about holding a title granted by others, but about writing the rules of the game itself and controlling the levers of the state apparatus, the institutions, the appointments, the flow of information and command. It's a surprising detail how quickly he moved, not just to seize power, but to rewrite the foundational code legitimizing that seizure, using the complex language of law to mask simple authoritarian control. The republic isn't being restored. It's being hollowed out and repurposed as the scaffolding for personal rule. This moment is a chilling insight. Those who successfully seize power understand the necessity of quickly rewriting the foundational laws, not just to legitimize their coup, but to cement their control permanently, often burying their intentions under layers of bureaucracy and complex articles. It's the subtle dismantling of checks and balances under the guise of restoring order, a trick pulled throughout history by those who promise stability but deliver autocracy. Your takeaway from this crucial turning point: beware of the leader who claims to rescue the state from chaos while quietly, legally, dismantling the very mechanisms meant to prevent tyranny. He didn't need a crown yet. He wrote one out of parchment and ink. Ask yourself, was this legal maneuvering the pragmatic brilliance of a statesman rebuilding a broken nation, or the ruthless calculation of a dictator laying the cornerstone of his empire? You walk the rain-slicked cobblestones of Paris. The air is heavy, not just with the scent of the Seine, but with a quiet tension. Look around. The vibrant chaos of revolutionary pamphlets and competing broadsheets is gone. Where dozens of newspapers once clamored with differing opinions, now only a handful remain. They sing a single, monotonous tune. The brilliance, the wisdom, the indispensable genius of the first consul, Napoleon Bonaparte. This isn't organic unity. It's a carefully orchestrated chorus, volume controlled by the maestro himself. You know, just as everyone else knows, that the printing presses that dared to question, the voices that dared to criticize, have been silenced, their owners imprisoned, their operations dissolved like sugar in hot tea. The suppression extends beyond the printed word. The postal service, once a conduit for news and gossip, is now a net for surveillance. Letters are opened, sentiments assessed. A careless phrase in a private note could earn unwanted attention. Potential dissidents aren't rounded up in mass executions like the Reign of Terror. They are watched, their movements tracked, their associates noted. It's a chilling, calculated vigilance, a cold machine ensuring conformity. Opposition is not debated or countered. It is simply eradicated from the public sphere, leaving an eerie void where independent thought once thrived. This is the quiet consolidation of power. For Napoleon, securing the future of France, his France, requires more than just popular support, won on the battlefield, or through administrative reform. It demands the active dismantling of any platform where doubt might breed, where alternative narratives could take root. Control of information becomes the bedrock of his authority. Shaping the national consciousness, ensuring the people hear only what he deems necessary, is as vital a strategic move as positioning troops before a battle. He understands, perhaps more acutely than any one of his time, that the narrative is power. And the people, they accept it. Weary of years of upheaval, of the guillotine's shadow, and the constant threat of internal strife, they trade noisy freedom for quiet stability. Security feels like a warm blanket after a long storm, even if that blanket stifles them slightly. Here lies the profound, uncomfortable truth. How easily can a population exhausted by conflict and chaos welcome censorship and surveillance if it arrives wrapped in the promise of order and unity? Ask yourself, does security ever truly justify the systematic suppression of free thought? Does stability bought with silence taste like victory or merely surrender? For Napoleon, the answer was clear. For history, the debate continues. The year is 1802. You stand amidst the cautious optimism filling the air. The Treaty of Amiens is being signed. For years, a whirlwind of revolution and war has torn across Europe, with Great Britain, the formidable island nation, a relentless antagonist to revolutionary France. Now, silence, a temporary ceasefire in the storm. You witness the representatives affix their names, a collective sigh of relief, echoing not just through the halls of Amiens, but across continents. France, exhausted by a decade of upheaval and conflict, longs for stability, for prosperity, for this very moment of calm. Napoleon Bonaparte, the general who orchestrated crushing victories at Lodi, Arcole, and Marengo, who seized power in a coup, is suddenly representing himself. He is no longer merely the military genius. He is the first consul, the architect of peace. His image undergoes a swift, deliberate transformation. Propaganda portrays him not with a sword, but with an olive branch, not on a charging horse, but overseeing canals and infrastructure projects. The public, weary of bloodshed, embraces this new narrative with fervent gratitude. Adoration swells. He leverages this fragile peace, this longed-for respite, to solidify his grip on power. He positions himself as the sole individual capable of taming the revolutionary fervor and bringing order, prosperity, and harmonious relations with old enemies. This moment reveals a profound strategic insight into leadership and legitimacy. Military conquest can earn awe, even fear, but genuine, widespread legitimacy often blossoms from delivering tangible, deeply desired states like peace and economic stability. Napoleon understood this intuitively. While his victories were essential to his initial rise, it was the promise and temporary delivery of calm that allowed him to transition from a military strongman to a widely accepted national leader. He wasn't just the man who won wars. He became the man who ended them, who brought quiet back to the anxious nights of France. The treaty, though inherently unstable and ultimately doomed, served its immediate purpose. It provided Napoleon with a powerful, popular mandate based on the relief and hope it inspired. He didn't just sign a treaty. He signed a contract of perceived security with the French people. But look closer. This peace was a chessboard maneuver, a strategic pause for Britain to recover economically and for Napoleon to consolidate his gains and prepare for the next inevitable conflict. The treaty itself was riddled with ambiguities and unresolved tensions, like the fate of Malta, almost guaranteeing its collapse. This era, dubbed the Peace of Amiens, lasted barely 14 months. It was less a cornerstone of lasting harmony and more a beautifully wrapped gift of time, bought and paid for in diplomatic concessions and the collective exhaustion of nations. There's a subtle, tragic irony here. The man whose power was forged in the fires of war became most legitimate in the eyes of his people when he temporarily extinguished them. He was celebrated as the restorer and savior from the very chaos he often instigated or exploited. Consider the dynamic at play. A leader delivers a moment of profound relief, a victory, an economic boom, a period of calm, and then uses the resulting wave of public gratitude and trust to consolidate greater personal power, often presenting this consolidation as necessary to preserve the very benefits just delivered. Only I can maintain this peace, the message implicitly or explicitly states. Ask yourself, was this brief era of peace a genuine attempt at a new European order, or was it a calculated political maneuver to elevate Napoleon's domestic standing and prepare for future aggression? This period is a potent reminder. Be wary when a leader leverages moments of crisis resolution or longed-for relief to demand expanded authority or alter the foundational rules of the state. The savior narrative, built upon delivering tangible benefits after periods of suffering, is one of the most powerful tools in the political arsenal. Napoleon, the ultimate pragmatist, wielded it masterfully, turning a fragile diplomatic pause into a stepping stone towards empire. Simply by giving the people what they desperately craved, if only for a fleeting moment. You step out of the dust and thunder of campaigns, the scent of gunpowder fading, replaced by the musty quiet of wood-paneled rooms. You are no longer on a windswept plain, but amidst scrolls of parchment and hushed arguments. Here, the battles are fought with words, definitions, and the intricate architecture of human society. Napoleon, no longer the general on horseback, is the driving force, seated at the head of a long table, guiding France's foremost legal minds. This is the Council of State, and their mission is monumental: to forge a single, unified legal code out of the patchwork of regional customs and revolutionary decrees that splintered the nation. Witness him, now, not dictating terms of surrender, but dictating articles of law. He probes, he challenges, sometimes he simply declares. His will is clear: order, clarity, and the protection of property rights. Principles deeply rooted in his own modest background, where ambition was often tied to ownership. He insists on a family structure where the father holds significant authority, a reflection perhaps of his own patriarchal upbringing and the need for a stable, predictable social unit. The resulting civil code, the Code Napoleon, becomes a cornerstone of modern European law, a blueprint exported across his empire, shaping the legal systems of nations long after his armies retreated. It's a paradox. The man who overthrew an old order becomes the architect of a new one, a lasting framework built on the foundations of the very revolution he initially championed, yet subtly adjusted to serve his authoritarian vision. But the foundations aren't just legal. You see the birth of the Bank of France, creating a stable currency after the inflationary chaos of the Revolution. You observe the establishment of the lycée system, a centralized, standardized education designed to produce loyal citizens and capable administrators for his burgeoning state, a system that endures in France to this day. These aren't the spoils of war. They are deliberate acts of creation, designed to embed his power, his principles, into the very fabric of the nation. While battles won and lost dominate the popular narrative, it is often these quiet administrative triumphs, the code, the coin, the classroom, that truly define a leader's long-term impact. They create the order, the infrastructure, the shared understanding of rights and responsibilities that can perpetuate a vision for generations, sometimes even against the will of those who live within its confines. It's a powerful, if chilling, reminder that control isn't always about the boot. Sometimes it's about the rulebook. Ask yourself, beyond the immediate struggles of your own life, what enduring structures, what codes or institutions are you building or failing to build that will truly define the order you leave behind? The air in Paris grows thick with murmurs, a curated breeze carrying whispers from gilded salons to grimy printing presses. You, Napoleon, watch from your quiet study in the Tuileries, a spider sensing the vibrations in its web. It begins subtly, articles appearing in sympathetic newspapers, seemingly organic conversations reported from society gatherings. Consul for 10 years? But what stability does that offer France? We need permanence, a guarantee, a lifetime appointment. The seed is planted. It drifts through the city like pollen, carried by those loyalists and opportunists eager to interpret your unspoken desires. The whispers deepen, taking on a richer, more regal tone. Consul for life is good, yes, but what after? The revolution plunged us into chaos. We need succession, a lineage, a hereditary title. Suddenly, France is discussing not just perpetual power, but dynasties. You see pamphlets circulating, carefully anonymous, of course, drawing parallels. Caesar crossing the Rubicon, Charlemagne crowned Emperor of the West. The language is historical, academic even, but the message is undeniable. Napoleon is the modern heir to imperial destiny. You are not directly ordering this. Not yet. Your hand is hidden, moving proxies like pieces on a grand chessboard. Fouché's police report on the public mood, the controlled press echo chamber, the carefully briefed courtiers, all are instruments in this symphony of engineered demand. This isn't a spontaneous groundswell. It is a manufactured tide, skillfully guided. Ambition, when it aims for the very summit of power, rarely announces its final destination with a trumpet blast. Instead, it probes, it suggests, it tests the atmospheric pressure. You watch the reactions, gauge the resistance, identify the potential fault lines. Each whisper is a reconnaissance mission. The goal is to make the next, bolder step, the declaration of an empire, seem not like a power grab, but a reluctant acceptance of the nation's will, a necessary bulwark against renewed instability. It's a chillingly shrewd maneuver, creating the very popular demand you intend to fulfill. This phase reveals a critical insight into the nature of absolute ambition. The leader isn't merely reactive or even purely proactive. They are often a master manipulator of the environment itself, cultivating the conditions under which their desired outcome becomes not just possible, but seemingly inevitable, even desired. It's less about seizing power from opponents and more about guiding an entire nation into believing they need you to take it. Ask yourself, is this strategic brilliance a necessary manipulation to secure the gains of the revolution and prevent a return to chaos? Or is it the insidious craft of a tyrant, using the levers of public opinion to pave the path to absolute rule? What would it take for you, standing in his position, to believe such carefully constructed demand was genuine? The groundwork for the crown isn't laid by decree, but by suggestion, by narrative, by the careful, persistent whisper that becomes eventually the roar of inevitability. Into Baden, under the cloak of night, spectral figures sent on a chilling errand. It is March 1804, and you see them seize the Duc d'Enghien, a young Bourbon prince, tearing him from neutral soil. This is not war. This is an abduction, a blatant disregard for borders, a ruthless extension of power. He is rushed back across the landscape like a captive prize, hurtled towards the ancient stone walls of Vincennes Castle. There, the pretense of justice unfolds in the darkest hours. You witness a mock trial, a grotesque charade under flickering lamplight, the verdict sealed before a word is spoken. His crime being a name, a lineage, a potential rallying point for shadows of royalist plots, however distant or ill-defined. Napoleon Bonaparte orders this, the man who rose on the tide of revolution against kings, now acting with the absolute, cold authority of a monarch of old. Before dawn breaks, the Duc d'Enghien is led into the castle moat. The air is thick with the damp chill of the pre-dawn, the silence broken only by the scuff of boots on gravel and the grim commands. A firing squad stands ready. There is no clemency, no hesitation. The shots ring out, echoing within the stone walls, a brutal exclamation point on a life extinguished, not for proven guilt, but for potential inconvenience. You feel the shock ripple outwards, across France, across the courts of Europe. This isn't just an execution. It's a declaration, a chilling message etched in blood. Opposition, real or imagined, will be annihilated. Internal enemies, external critics, royalist hopes, they all understand now. The first consul will stop at nothing. The principle laid bare is stark, terrifyingly simple. For a leader determined to ascend to ultimate authority, Perceived threats, however distant or unsubstantiated, must be eliminated without hesitation, regardless of legality or morality. The rule of law bends and breaks before the iron will to survive and dominate. The inside closet you. The path to absolute power is not paved with grand ideals or popular consent alone, but often with the crushed lives of opponents, those who stand, or might one day stand, in the way. It is a ruthless calculus of survival and ambition. Ask yourself, what price are you willing to pay, or are you asking others to pay, for your sense of security or the safety of your ambition? The ground in that moat is soaked with the answer for Napoleon at this defining, brutal moment. You stand in the opulent, stifling air of the Senate chamber in May 1804. Gilt edges gleam, velvet seats are filled with men whose primary virtue is pliancy. The air isn't thick with revolutionary fervor. It hums with quiet ambition and practiced subservience. You watch as a resolution is read aloud, words carefully chosen, devoid of genuine debate. That Napoleon Bonaparte be proclaimed Emperor of the French, and that the imperial dignity be hereditary in his family. This isn't the roar of a triumphant army lifting its general onto a shield, nor the surge of a popular uprising demanding a king. No, this is a meticulously staged scene, a bureaucratic coronation by committee. This servile body, the Senate, has been carefully pruned over years, opposition quietly removed, dissent stifled. It rubber stamps what has already been decided in back rooms and palaces. It's a chilling insight. Absolute power is rarely seized by revolution from below. It is more often conferred, legitimized, even requested by the very institutions you've already co-opted from above. They provide the veneer of process, the illusion of consent. Following the senatorial declaration comes a plebiscite, a vote of the entire nation. But the outcome is a foregone conclusion, as predictable as sunrise after a storm. Control over the press, control over local administrations, control over the narrative. It all ensures the yes vote is overwhelming, sanitizing the power grab with the appearance of popular will. It's a national theater production, with millions cast as enthusiastic extras cheering for a title few truly clamored for. The surprising detail here: it wasn't a bloody coup d'etat on the streets of Paris to bring back monarchy. It was a calculated, almost corporate takeover, blessed by manipulated state bodies. A republic, born in fire and guillotines to abolish kings, now formally votes to crown an emperor. The tragic irony hangs heavy. The symbols of revolution become the instruments of consolidation, leading directly back to hereditary rule, albeit under a new name. It's like watching a circular chess game where the king piece, once removed, is simply reintroduced under a different label. Ask yourself, how complicit are established systems and compliant institutions in the rise of authoritarianism? Does the very act of following a corrupted process, providing a legalistic framework for an illegal power grab, make those bodies accessories to the death of freedom? This moment isn't just about Napoleon. It's about the eternal vulnerability of republics when ambition finds willing accomplices within the very structures designed to protect liberty. You watch the formal proceedings, the signing of papers, the quiet nods of approval, and understand. The cage of empire isn't always built by force. Sometimes it's politely requested and officially certified. The Tuileries Palace buzzes not with the quiet intrigue of council, but with the frantic energy of artisans preparing a grand performance. You are surrounded by the rustle of heavy silks and velvets, the clink of scissors, the hurried whispers of tailors and heraldists. Robes are taking shape, enormous, trailing cloaks destined for an emperor and empress, thick with the weight of ermine, studded with the gold-embroidered bees. These aren't just decorative motifs, they are deliberate pronouncements, lifted from the graves of Merovingian kings, symbols of ancient lineage and the persistent industry of France, now appropriated by a Corsican upstart. The imperial eagle, sharp-taloned and fierce, is being emblazoned everywhere, a direct challenge to the ancient dynasties of Europe, echoing Roman power. Meanwhile, in nearby chambers, a different kind of crafting is underway, a negotiation so intense it crackles in the air. Napoleon commands, and his ministers bargain with envoys from Rome. The prize? The physical presence of Pope Pius VII in Paris. This isn't about religious devotion. It's about sacred legitimacy. The revolution tried to erase God and king. Napoleon, though a product of that revolution, understands the profound psychological need for spiritual endorsement, for a crown touched by the hand of the Vicar of Christ. He demands Pius VII come to Paris, across the city. Notre Dame Cathedral, scarred by revolutionary fervor, is being transformed. Stripped of its revolutionary austerity, it is being recloaked in imperial grandeur. Tapestries hung, altars prepared, a vast throne erected, positioned strategically before the main altar, above the seated clergy. Every detail is curated, every sightline calculated. This is not a humble coronation. It is a theatrical ascension. It's a colossal piece of political theater where the stage, the costumes, the actors, and even the highest spiritual authority on earth are bent to communicate one undeniable message. A new era has dawned, ordained not just by victory, but by destiny, symbolized by this meticulous spectacle. The insight here is stark. Power consolidates itself not merely through laws and bayonets, but through spectacle. It creates a visual language, a new mythology that speaks directly to the people's imagination, bypassing logic to communicate authority and destiny. This entire elaborate production, from the sewing of a bee onto velvet to the subtle coercion of the Pope, is Napoleon's grand argument to France and to Europe. I am not just a general who seized power. I am the chosen leader, blessed by history and validated by God, whether he wanted to participate or not. It is a fusion of ancient ritual and modern ambition, a breathtaking display of understanding that the human heart craves symbols, lineage, and a touch of the divine, even if those things must be manufactured or forcefully acquired. Look beyond the dazzling robes and the solemn procession. Understand the strategic message being conveyed through every piece of ermine, every golden bee, every negotiation with the Pope. This was not mere vanity. It was a calculated move on the grand chessboard of legitimacy. Ask yourself, when you see power presented with such elaborate ritual and symbolism today, what strategic message is truly being communicated beneath the surface? Are you seeing genuine authority, or just a very expensive, very effective piece of political theater? You stand within the ancient, echoing nave of Notre Dame. December 2nd, 1804. The air is thick with the scent of burning frankincense, heavy as the weight of centuries pressing down. Sunlight, filtered through stained glass, catches dust motes dancing in the hallowed space, illuminating the assembly of emperors, marshals, and courtiers. Anticipation crackles like static electricity. History is not just being observed, it is being made, right here, right now. At the altar stands Pope Pius VII, his expression a complex mix of piety and palpable unease. He is present, a vital, unwilling prop in a drama he cannot control. The moment arrives. You watch as Napoleon, the Emperor of the French, approaches the altar. This is where tradition is meant to flow, where the sacred anointing connects temporal power to divine right, usually through the hands of the pontiff. But Napoleon is not here for inherited legitimacy or celestial blessing dispensed by another. He is here to declare his own source of power. He faces the altar, back to the crowd, then turns. The crown is not offered to him by the Pope. It sits there, waiting. And with a deliberate, utterly self-possessed gesture that chills some and electrifies others, Napoleon Bonaparte reaches out, takes the golden symbol of empire from the altar itself, and places it firmly upon his own head. The gasp is almost inaudible in the grand space, but it ripples through the onlookers. This single act is more potent than any battle won. It is a visual thunderclap, a public, unmistakable rejection of the old order, of the idea that his authority derived from God or ancestry. His power, he asserts, springs solely from himself, forged in the crucible of revolution, earned through victories, willed into existence by his own ambition and genius. He owes it to no one but himself. Then, in a final, tender yet equally commanding act, he turns towards his empress, Josephine, kneeling before him. With a soft expression that contrasts sharply with the iron will he just displayed, he gently places a smaller crown upon her head. He elevates her, too, but her power is derived from his. The message is crystalline. Every ounce of authority in this new empire flows from the man who stands here, crowned by his own hand. This scene is not merely symbolic. It is a meticulously orchestrated assertion of radical self-reliance. It's the ultimate expression of ambition, the public declaration that you have climbed so high, achieved so much, that you answer only to the force of your own will. It's a moment of astonishing hubris, perhaps, but also of undeniable clarity regarding the new foundation of his power. A subtle irony hangs in the perfumed air. This man who owes his rise to the anti-monarchical fervor of the revolution now crowns himself emperor in a sacred cathedral, outdoing the old kings in his assertion of absolute personal authority, even over the Pope. The core insight is unforgettable. Ambition's pinnacle can be the dramatic, public declaration that you owe your position to no one but yourself. You stand there, watching, and ask yourself, in your own climb, are you seeking validation from external authority or asserting your own earned right? And at what point does that necessary self-reliance tip into dangerous, isolating arrogance? This moment in Notre Dame was Napoleon drawing that line, or perhaps stepping right over it. You sit, if you are allowed near, in the Emperor's council chambers after 1804. The air is thick not just with the scent of burning logs and ink, but with unspoken caution. Gone are the robust, sometimes even fiery debates that characterized the consulate years. Back then, brilliant minds like Talleyrand and Fouché, even if adversaries felt some liberty to challenge, to offer alternative routes through the political landscape. Now, those voices are muted, or simply absent. Napoleon no longer convenes councils to seek counsel. He gathers ministers to announce decisions already made, etched onto the tablet of his singular will. The palace, once a vibrant, chaotic hub of revolutionary energy channeled into statecraft, has transformed into an imperial court. It swarms with courtiers, a glittering, anxious ecosystem where proximity to the Sun King is the ultimate currency. They jostle for favor, whisper flatteries, and mirror the emperor's moods. Honest criticism, the kind that pierces the bubble of self-assurance, is a rare and dangerous commodity. Why risk displeasure, exile, or worse, when a nod, a smile, agreement secures your position, your fortune? The very structure of the imperial court, meticulously designed by Napoleon himself to enhance his majesty, to project an aura of untouchable authority, also serves, perhaps unintentionally, to insulate him. It builds walls of deference and sycophancy around the man at its center. The scene is one of increasing formality, stiffness replacing flexibility, and a palpable decline in candid communication. The principle at play here is stark. Absolute power creates distance. It erects barriers of fear and ambition that actively discourage truth. The leader, however brilliant, finds himself increasingly surrounded by flatterers who merely reinforce his existing perceptions, validating his assumptions, however flawed they might be. This isn't just about Napoleon. It's a universal dynamic of power. The insight, cold and sharp, is that the higher a leader climbs, the more absolutely critical it becomes to actively, even aggressively, seek out uncomfortable truths, the dissenting opinions, the difficult feedback. Yet, it is precisely this discipline that power itself, with its attendant temptations of infallibility and its chorus of approval, so often erodes. Here lies the tragic irony. The man who rose by ruthlessly assessing reality, who saw the world as it was, now allows the world presented to him to be filtered through the lens of others' self-interest and his own growing desire for affirmation. Decisions once forged in the heat of genuine discussion are now handed down from an increasingly isolated throne. The takeaway for anyone wielding influence at any scale is chillingly relevant. How do you ensure you are hearing honest feedback, the unvarnished truth, and not just what people think you want to hear? What systems do you put in place to puncture the bubble of positive reinforcement, especially as your own influence grows? Napoleon, trapped by the court he built, offers a silent, powerful warning. The golden bees embroidered on your mantle feel less like decoration, more like the weight of the world. You are emperor. But the moment the crown settles, everything shifts. The courts of Europe, who grudgingly acknowledge the brilliant, powerful first consul, now recoil from the self-proclaimed emperor. This isn't merely a change of title, it's a cosmic assertion. It declares a new order where France is not just powerful, but supreme, demanding recognition, even subservience. This is a claim that no existing monarch, steeped in centuries of inherited legitimacy, can abide without feeling their own throne tremble. The fragile peace, bought with cunning and cannon fire, shatters like glass. The air thickens with the scent of coming conflict. The imperial title, meant to solidify power, becomes the ultimate casus belli, the unavoidable cause for war. It demands constant validation. You cannot simply be emperor. You must perpetually prove it through overwhelming force. You watch as ambassadors pack their bags, treaties turn to dust, and monarchs form new alliances. Their fear and outrage forging a new, formidable chain around France. This is the third coalition rising, quickly followed by the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. The map of Europe becomes a chessboard where kings maneuver against the self-crowned emperor, each move answered by the relentless marching of French legions. This isn't just about territory or trade anymore. It's a fundamental clash of ideologies, a struggle for the very definition of legitimate power in Europe. The imperial crown isn't a reward. It's a perpetual summons to the battlefield. You realize the terrible irony. In reaching for absolute, undeniable authority on the international stage, you haven't secured peace, but guaranteed endless war. The act of seizing that ultimate position fundamentally threatens the existing order, provoking relentless, existential resistance. The scene is one of constant mobilization, dusty roads filled with soldiers, the distant thunder of artillery practice, the urgent scribbling of strategic orders under lamplight, year after year after year. Ask yourself, does the very act of grasping for ultimate authority, for absolute power and dominion over others, inherently condemn a leader to a state of perpetual conflict, forever having to defend the elevated, isolated position they've seized against a world that refuses to bow? Is the price of the crown an endless, exhausting cycle of war? You stand on the frozen plains of Russia in 1812, the biting wind whipping ice crystals across your face. The air is thin, sharp, a brutal counterpoint to the grand visions of yesterday. Or perhaps you are on the muddy, sprawling fields near Leipzig in 1813, surrounded by the roar of cannons from all directions, the very earth trembling underfoot. Here, the unstoppable force meets an immovable object, not another brilliant general, but reality itself. You see the emperor, once the agile leopard, now more like a trapped lion. His will is still immense, his tactical eye sharp, but something has calcified. The flexibility that won Marengo and Austerlitz is gone, replaced by a rigid insistence that the world must bend to his command, even as it is clearly breaking him. In Russia, he drives deeper, chasing a victory that evaporates like mist, underestimating the raw, brutal power of distance and winter. He believes his army can simply endure, that his presence can somehow melt the snows or conjure supplies from the empty steppes. This is the moment the mirror begins to crack, reflecting not omnipotence, but desperate self-deception. Consider the retreat from Moscow. Not just a military withdrawal, but an unraveling of epic proportions. Yet even as his Grande Armée starves and freezes, reduced to specters, the emperor plans new campaigns, demands fresh levies. There is a tragic irony here. The man who mastered logistics and organization is undone by their utter collapse on a scale he refused to comprehend until it was too late. He had seen smaller armies destroyed by winter before, perhaps forgetting the lessons others learned in blood. At Leipzig, the battle of nations, he is outnumbered. His allies are wavering. His troops are often raw recruits or reluctant foreigners. He fights brilliantly, yes, but he fights a battle he cannot win against the sheer weight of numbers and the dawning realization across Europe that the emperor is no longer invincible. The principle is stark and unforgiving. Even the most absolute power slams headfirst into fundamental limitations. You cannot command the weather. You cannot abolish distance. You cannot sustain an army without food. And you cannot forever suppress the collective will of determined opposition. Napoleon's previous victories had perhaps whispered a dangerous lie, that sheer force of will and genius could overcome anything. Years of unchecked power, surrounded by flatterers, had potentially built a fortress of infallibility around his mind, blinding him to the very real walls closing in. Ask yourself, when does confidence become arrogance? When does vision become delusion? In these frozen fields and blood-soaked plains, you see the answer etched in snow and mud. This is the devastating failure where the limits of even absolute power are brutally exposed by reality. The unchecked ambition and belief in one's own infallibility, so potent on the road to glory, become the architects of ruin, chaining the leader to a path they can no longer control. Your takeaway, standing here amidst the ghosts of empires, recognize that power, no matter how vast, has boundaries. True wisdom, and perhaps the only way to endure, lies in understanding and respecting them before reality delivers its own brutal lesson. You sit in a cramped room, the endless mocking blue of the Atlantic your only significant view. The grandeur is gone. The golden eagles, the imperial guard, the map of a continent bent to your will, replaced by modest furniture and the watchful eyes of captors who now refer to you dismissively as General Bonaparte. Saint Helena, or perhaps Elba, a brief deceptive prelude to this final, desolate stage. The emperor is dead. The prisoner remains. The storm of your life has passed, leaving behind this eerie calm, this enforced idleness that is a torment in itself. You walk the limited paths, watch the ships that never bring escape, and the mind, once occupied with the fate of empires, turns inward. Did the crown, so fiercely sought, so ruthlessly won, truly bring happiness? Did absolute power guarantee security? Did it forge a lasting dynasty? The silence of the sea offers no comfort. It brought supreme power, yes, a dizzying ascent to heights no man since Caesar had truly reached. But at what cost? The cost of perpetual war, of millions dead, of a continent in turmoil. The cost of peace, not just for France, but for yourself. The stability you craved for your regime ultimately crumbled under the weight of your ambition. And your own freedom? An ironic jest, is it not? The man who commanded nations is now confined to a rock in the ocean. You recall the coronation, the moment you placed the laurel on your own head, a symbol of self-made destiny. But looking out at the waves, that glory feels thin, spectral. It guaranteed nothing. Your son, the King of Rome, the hope of your line, his destiny stolen. France, which you raised to dizzying heights, left bleeding and smaller than you found her in the end. The profound, bitter irony is this: the relentless pursuit of absolute control led inexorably to the complete loss of it. The machine you built, designed to extend your power infinitely, demanded such fuel, blood, treasure, stability, that it eventually consumed itself, and you along with it. Consider the true nature of that pursuit. It wasn't just about governing, was it? It was about being the indispensable center, the ultimate authority, the man who made the impossible possible. A surprisingly relatable, yet terrifying, human impulse writ large. The ambition was a furnace, and you were its stoker, throwing everything into it. Alliances, lives, your own health, even your reputation for moderation, which vanished like mist on a battlefield. A subtle wit might note that you conquered everything but boredom and a healthy digestive system in the end. A deeper insight emerges from this enforced quiet. The pursuit of power for power's sake is a treadmill that stops only when the runner collapses. There is no inherent finish line, only the next horizon to dominate. Its true cost is measured not in conquered territories or accumulated wealth or bestowed titles, but in the erosion of genuine human connection, the sacrifice of internal peace, and the enduring, often negative consequences left for others. The legacy is a double-edged sword. Admiration for brilliance, tempered by the immense shadow of suffering caused. You, sitting there on your island, a monument to consequence, embody a chilling principle. The ultimate value of absolute power is profoundly questionable when its achievement demands the sacrifice of peace, stability, and eventually the very position it sought to guarantee. It's the ultimate Pyrrhic victory played out over a lifetime. Look at this scene, this solitary figure against the vast indifference of the sea. What was gained, truly, that could not be taken away? What prize could justify this cage? Ask yourself, what is the real goal of your ambition? Look past the titles and the recognition. Is the prize, whatever form it takes, worth the inevitable cost? Especially when that cost includes parts of yourself and the well-being of those around you. Ponder the waves, ponder the cost. From the chaotic streets of post-revolutionary Paris, where the air still hummed with the echoes of guillotines and the promise of a new dawn, you trace the arc of a man who dared to seize the sun. You see the ascent, swift and sharp, through the ranks of a fractured republic. You witness the strategic brilliance forged in Italian campaigns, the ruthless pragmatism honed in the corridors of political infighting, the profound self-belief that convinced a nation he was its savior. This man, Napoleon Bonaparte, rises, first as consul, stabilizing a land weary of chaos, installing order with an iron hand sheathed in velvet reform. He is the restorer, the promise keeper, the architect of a fragile peace. But watch closely, feel the shift. The momentum of power is a dangerous current. The title of consul, even first consul for life, is not enough. Ambition, a beast he thought he controlled, begins to unleash itself fully. It's a transformation less about destiny calling and more about a series of deliberate choices, each one a step higher, each one narrowing the path behind him. The decision looms, whispers in the Tuileries, resonates in the halls of power. Take the crown, become emperor. This isn't merely a change of title. It's a profound personal transformation, a crossing of the Rubicon that alters the course of history and forever changes the man. It's the consolidation of power, not just in law, but in the very symbol of monarchy he once claimed to overthrow. You stand with him in Notre Dame, the chill November air outside, the hushed grandeur within. The moment arrives. He takes the crown, not from the Pope's hands, a gesture dripping with historical defiance and self-exaltation, but places it upon his own head. It is the culmination of the grasp for ultimate authority, a symbolic declaration that his power derives solely from himself, from his achievements, from his will. This isn't the shy acceptance of a people's mandate. It is the bold assertion of sovereignty, a deliberate break from the republican ideals that brought him to prominence. This coronation, while seemingly the peak of his ambition, reveals a deeper, perhaps unsettling truth. The relentless pursuit of power, once achieved, isolates. The empress is crowned, the dignitaries bow, but the air around the newly self-made emperor is different, thinner, lonelier. The vast, war-torn empire he builds upon this foundation is a testament to strategic brilliance and tireless administration. But it is also built on shifting sands, fueled by perpetual conflict, demanding endless sacrifice. The initial ideals of the revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, become distorted echoes in the gilded cage of the imperial court and the constant drumbeat of war. The ruthless pragmatism that served him in battle becomes a cold calculation in diplomacy and governance, alienating allies and breeding enemies. The profound self-belief hardens into hubris, a refusal to admit error, a blind spot to the growing exhaustion of his people and the rising tide of opposition across Europe. This path, chosen step by step, leads inexorably from the throne in Paris to the lonely rock of St. Helena. The island is more than a prison. It is the ultimate consequence of ambition unchecked, of a grasp that exceeded reach. It is here, in exile, that the tale finds its tragic irony. The man who commanded millions, dictated terms to kings, and reshaped continents is reduced to a captive on a remote island, his only battles fought with memories and historical narratives. The empire dissolves, the crown is lost, but the questions remain, hanging in the air like the mist over Longwood House. The story of Napoleon's crown is less about a predetermined destiny and more about a sequence of pivotal choices. Each decision, from the coup of 18 Brumaire to the fatal march on Moscow, was a step further down a path where the stakes increased, the options decreased, and the demands for sacrifice from himself, his marshals, and a nation grew ever greater. The shift from consul of a fragile republic to emperor of a vast, unstable empire isn't just a historical event, it's a timeless truth etched in the human condition. Power is intoxicating, yes, but it is also a mirror that can distort the self, isolating the leader from the very people they command. Its relentless pursuit often devours the very ideals that paved the way. Ask yourself, was the decision to take the crown the inevitable next step for a man of his capabilities, or the fatal error born of insatiable ambition? What would you have done, standing in his boots, feeling the weight of expectation, the pressure of a nation's fate, the intoxicating pull of absolute control? The view from the summit he aspired to was indeed distorted, the air thin. His descent, though delayed, was sudden and irreversible. The legacy of the emperor, the enduring question he poses from St. Helena, is this: be careful what summits you aspire to. The climb might be glorious, but the price of reaching the very top, the ultimate grasp for power, might be everything. You stand now, not in 1804 Paris, but in your own time, looking at the monuments, the legal codes, the administrative structures across Europe that still bear the unmistakable mark of Napoleon's hand. The question hangs in the air, heavy with centuries of consequence. What was the real price of that crown? Not just for the man who wore it, the young Corsican obsessed with destiny, but for France, for Europe, for the very ideals of the revolution he rose from, swore to uphold, and ultimately seemed to betray. The consolidation of power you witnessed, the seismic shift from first citizen, the revered savior of France, to imperial majesty, wasn't merely a change in title, a grand ceremony under the vaulted ceilings of Notre Dame. It was a fundamental alteration of the political landscape, a profound step away from the fledgling, chaotic republicanism towards a new, terrifyingly efficient form of centralized, personal rule. It teaches us a stark, often painful lesson. The path from savior to sovereign is perilously short, paved not just with grand victories, but with convenience, born of societal fatigue and fear, and guided by the seductive, seemingly rational logic of necessary control. What if, in moments of deep crisis today, faced with uncertainty or perceived threats, we too look for the strongman, the one who promises order, stability, and swift solutions by consolidating all power unto himself? What if we, like a weary, post-revolutionary France, trade hard-won freedoms, the messy, difficult work of self-governance, for the illusion of security offered by absolute authority? The echo of Napoleon's choice resonates across time, a warning whenever ambition meets opportunity in the vacuum of instability. His life, marked irrevocably by that pivotal moment of taking the crown, stands as an epic, tragic parable. Greatness, severed from self-awareness and unchecked by principle, breeds exile, not enduring empire. The craving for ultimate authority, the deep-seated belief that you alone possess the vision and capability to solve everything, is a mirage. It promises absolute control, but inevitably delivers isolation, demanding constant conflict, internal and external, until reality, or combined opposition, brings the illusion crashing down. As he himself perhaps understood in his final, desolate years on a wind-swept island, stripped of his crown, his empire, and his illusions, the most formidable prison is often the one built by boundless ambition, brick by brick, with the very aspirations that propelled you to the summit. To paraphrase the man who wore the fateful crown, history is a set of lies agreed upon. But perhaps the greatest, most self-destructive lie of all is the one power tells itself, that it is invincible, immutable, and that the crown, once taken, can ever be truly secure from the forces of change, reality, or the enduring human spirit yearning for something more than simply being ruled. In the end, it wasn't the battlefield that ultimately defeated him. It was believing the crown made him invincible.